Why is his blood inside your house? Okay, is that because that you've assaulted him, killed him, and disposed of the evidence but left some behind?
This image captures the last known moments of 55-year-old Edward Forrester. Better known as Eddie, he was simply walking his beloved dog near his home in Blackpool at 1:31 p.m. on September 1st, 2023. Just after this footage was taken, Eddie vanished, but there were traces that the perpetrator attempted to erase, to try to hide from, to run from, desperate to evade justice. We now know what happened to Eddie. His end was shocking and brutal, yet it was after his murder that the truly horrific acts began. This case begins as a moment of pure rage, but when the perpetrator attempts to distance himself from the horror he unleashed, it makes me wonder how someone can go from a seemingly normal member of society to dissecting a human body and removing its organs for pleasure. Sickening. But before we dive in, I want to let you know about my second channel called Grim Tales, where I'm covering true stories that are shocking but not murderous. I think if you find this content interesting, then you should see what's over there. Link to the channel is in the comments. And if you find this video interesting, then please drop it a like, as it really helps. Also, if interested, you can subscribe to my Instagram here. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse or condone the criminal actions described within. Edward Forrester, known to his friends as Eddie, was the kind of person who was easy to like, friendly yet reserved. Eddie was described as somewhat vulnerable. A brain injury in the 90s left him with mild learning difficulties, and he relied on a variety of medications to manage his health. Eddie also faced mobility challenges, walking with the aid of a stick, and he struggled with reading and writing. Despite these hurdles, his life was bright. He was originally from Glasgow, but moved to Blackpool decades prior. This is when he met his close friend, Trevor Lake, who helped him with tasks that proved difficult to him, such as filling out forms and cooking. Lake was often around, but Eddie also had his beloved dog Cassie, whom he walked at least twice a day. Eddie was an animal lover, keeping not just his dog but also fish in his flat. He enjoyed shopping, meeting friends, going for lunches, and socialising whenever he could. His family described him and quote, as a quiet and harmless individual who wouldn't hurt a soul. Eddie lived a simple but meaningful life on the second floor of a house that had been converted into 2 flats. In the flat below Eddie lived a 65-year-old man named William Wilkinson. The two never saw eye to eye. Wilkinson had been violent towards Eddie in the past, once leaving him with a black eye. He frequently complained about Eddie to neighbours across the street, even boasting that he could, and quote, have him if he wanted to. I am not sure where the conflict between the two started, but I do know that there was a recent issue that they had with each other that had escalated over something that could have been easily solved. Wilkinson had been leaving food out for the birds, but Eddie had complained about it, saying that it was attracting rats and mice into the property. Eddie had lodged a formal complaint to the council about this, and the atmosphere within the property had grown increasingly toxic, setting the stage for something far worse to happen. On August 31st, 2023, Trevor Lake received a text from Eddie, confirming their usual plans to meet for lunch the following day, Friday, September 1st. A routine they never missed. But when Eddie failed to show up the next day, Trevor immediately knew something was wrong. Not only did Eddie not arrive, but he also wasn't answering his phone. Concerned, Trevor rushed over to Eddie's flat, fearing his friend might have been in an accident and needed help. What he found instead was far more alarming. Eddie was nowhere to be seen, and his dog, Cassie, remained. The dog was clearly distressed and hungry, having been left alone for some time. Unsure of what to do, Trevor went downstairs and knocked on Wilkinson's door, asking if he had seen Eddie. Wilkinson claimed he hadn't heard or seen Eddie at all. Still worried, Trevor visited the local hospital, hoping to find Eddie there, but there was still no sign of him. Growing more anxious by the minute, Trevor finally filed a missing person report, which would set off a chain of events that would soon reveal the dark and disturbing truth. On September 3rd, police launched a missing person search at the residence, where both Eddie and Wilkinson lived. They noticed blood around the doorframe of Wilkinson's flat and on the communal hallway walls and carpet. Officers realised that Eddie had now come into harm's way, and quickly they turned this into a murder investigation. Officers entered Wilkinson's flat on the same day, and once inside, the strong smell of cleaning products was the first thing that hit them. They noticed the fresh paint on the walls and skirting boards, but they soon learned that this was to conceal bloodstains. They also found blood spatter in the kitchen, along with a pool of water on the floor. They also found what they suspected to be the murder weapon, a broken wooden stick with a heavy bung on the end of it, which was hidden within a carrier bag. Wilkinson was now the prime suspect, but he was nowhere to be found. Officers quickly gathered as much CCTV of the area as they could to try and trace his footsteps. On September 1st, cameras captured Wilkinson carrying several large plastic bags, which he loaded into his Peugeot Boxer van. Whatever was inside the bags was substantial. While investigators followed Wilkinson's trail, forensic analysis of the flat revealed the horrifying truth of Eddie's fate. Blood spatter patterns painted a grim picture. Eddie had been seated upright on the floor when Wilkinson struck him repeatedly with the metal-headed stick. The brutality was shocking. Blood on the walls indicated at least 10 vicious blows to Eddie's head. But the attack didn't end there. Afterwards, Eddie's body was dragged into the kitchen, where Wilkinson dismembered him. Officers now feared the contents of the plastic bags Wilkinson had been seen carrying were more than just belongings. They likely contained the remains of Eddie, cut into pieces and disposed of in a cold and calculated manner. Wilkinson was spotted on CCTV on September 1st, 2nd and 3rd, driving around Blackpool and disposing of the ominous packages in various public bins. By the time police discovered that Eddie had been murdered, it was already too late. The bins had been emptied, making it impossible to recover the remains from either the bins or landfill sites. During this time, Wilkinson appeared to be trying to live a normal life, perhaps as a way of distancing himself from the horror he had inflicted. He was seen on CCTV entering shops, visiting a pawn shop where he sold his gold ring for £120, and stopping by a barber's to have his hair cut, styled, dyed, and his beard shaved. It was clear he was preparing to run, to change his appearance and vanish. His van, already equipped with a bed, seemed like the perfect hideout, allowing him to stay mobile and avoid capture. But before going into hiding, Wilkinson made one more stop. He was caught on camera buying bleach, air fresheners, and deep heat pads at a supermarket. The heat pads were likely bought to ease his back pain that he'd got from dismembering Eddie's body. The cleaning products were to try and remove the evidence from the flat. It's now believed that when Trevor knocked on Wilkinson's door, asking if he had seen Eddie, Wilkinson wasn't just sitting at home. He was there, in the midst of cleaning up the remains of his horrific crime. Police knew they had to act fast. Wilkinson was on the move, and if they didn't capture him soon, he could disappear, or even worse, strike again. Police used CCTV, ANPR, and telephone analysis to track down Wilkinson, and it was on September 5th in Cumbria that he was found sleeping in his van in the car park of the Kirkstone Inn. He was arrested and taken into custody.
Shortly, but I'm going to give you a quick search, right? So you've got a bag. Have you got any needles or anything like that?
Once interviewed, Wilkinson calmly denied all knowledge of any crime. He said that he had no idea where Eddie was. He didn't know if he had been harmed or not, and also claimed that the medication he was taking affected his memory.
Is Eddie still alive? Is he somewhere? If he is dead, we need to know where he is, William. Tell us where he is.
He said that he was on a mini holiday and him leaving had nothing to do with the disappearance of Eddie. Over the following days, September 6th, 7th and 8th, police intensified their interrogation.
You've been arrested this morning for murder. The circumstances around that is that Edward Forrester has been reported missing. Apparent blood has been found at your home address and you've been missing at the time of Edward's disappearance. What clothing have you had with you when you've been travelling? Have you changed your clothes through that period? There's been some clothing seized from you. Blue hooded top, black tracksuit bottoms, blue sleeveless t-shirt. What can you tell me about that clothing? No comment.
They presented Wilkinson with CCTV footage showing him disposing of bags in public bins, questioned him about the blood found in his flat, and confronted him with evidence of his clean-up efforts to erase the crime. Throughout it all, Wilkinson remained silent. At the end of the questioning, Wilkinson was charged with murder. As he was escorted back to his cell, he uttered one callous, chilling remark to the officer: "Good luck." Wilkinson knew full well that without a body, convicting him of murder in court would be a difficult task. Over the following days and weeks, police meticulously pieced together Wilkinson's so-called holiday to Cumbria. It was during this grim journey that Eddie's body parts were discovered, discarded across various locations in the county. Wilkinson was first spotted entering Breedon Road Edge Quarry, where he stayed for just 7 minutes. There, he discarded a bin bag into a hedge before driving away. The bag was later found to contain Eddie's severed head. He then continued to Kendal, where he was seen dropping another bag into the River Kent. After leaving Kendal, Wilkinson headed to a nearby village called Staveley. Phone records show that he spent the night on Ashes Lane, where police would later discover most, but not all, of Eddie's legs, stuffed inside 3 bin bags. 50 yards away, near a dry stone wall, Wilkinson discarded Eddie's arms, wrapped in multiple bags. Some of the fingers had been removed, but the fingertips were still in the bag. The final and most horrifying discovery in this location came when officers unearthed part of Eddie's mutilated torso, buried in a suitcase just 10 feet from the road. The next morning, Wilkinson made his way towards Windermere, this time carrying the largest package yet. On the A591, a passing motorist spotted Wilkinson with a suitcase. Later, officers found it partially buried. Inside was the other part of Eddie's torso, mutilated and crammed into a suitcase. Afterwards, Wilkinson stopped at Ings service station to change his clothes and used his phone to inquire about hiring a boat. No one knows for sure what his plans were for the boat, but it was widely assumed that he intended to dispose of more evidence. He then travelled to the Kirkstone Inn, where he was going to spend the night, but this is where police arrested him soon after. Eddie's remains had to undergo 3 separate post-mortems due to the staggered discovery of his body parts, and what they revealed was deeply disturbing. There were clear signs of self-defense wounds on Eddie's forearms and other areas of his body that showed he had fought desperately for his life. His head bore the brunt of the attack, with 10 gashes where he had been repeatedly struck with the metal bung. But the brutality didn't stop there. His cheekbones were shattered and a deep stab wound was found under his chin. It was later determined that a mechanical saw and a large knife were used to dismember his body. The injuries showed horrific evidence of the saw cutting through Eddie's bones and cartilage. But what the post-mortem revealed next was even more sinister. Wilkinson hadn't just dismembered the body to dispose of it. He had used the saw to crudely open Eddie's rib cage and removed his heart. This is where the true horror sets in. Wilkinson had no history of crimes like this. In fact, he had no criminal record. He was known to be violent, yes, but to leap from aggression to not only murder, but also the gruesome act of removing someone's heart suggests something far more twisted. This wasn't just about covering his tracks, it was something darker, more sinister, and disturbingly personal. The cause of death was determined to be blunt force trauma from the strikes to Eddie's head. Thankfully, it was confirmed that he had died before the dismemberment took place. However, not all of Eddie's remains were ever recovered, adding further torment to his grieving family. They were forced to wait 2.5 months before holding a funeral due to the various forensic tests and examinations needed for the investigation. And even then, it wasn't a complete burial due to the body parts that could never be found. When confronted with the evidence, including matching DNA from the crime scene, Wilkinson remained cold, offering nothing but a blank no comment during questioning.
Now, those 2 blood marks have been analysed and a DNA profile has been obtained, which relates to the victim. How can you explain that? Why is his blood inside your house? Okay, is that because that you've assaulted him, killed him, and disposed of the evidence but left some behind?
In court, Mr. Temkin Casey described the removal of Eddie's heart as a calculated and deliberate act. The judge, delivering the sentence, said, and quote, "The sentence for murder is fixed by law. There is only one sentence I can pass, namely life imprisonment. I must set the minimum term you must serve." He continued, "I remind myself Mr. Forrester was somewhat vulnerable. This was a sustained and brutal killing with a weapon. You caused gratuitous damage to his chest and heart. You undertook a cruel, callous, and systematic dismemberment of his body and scattered it all over a significant geographical area. What you did was far more grievous than merely concealing his body. It led to the irretrievable loss of parts of Mr. Forrester." Wilkinson was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum term of 22 years. Given his age, there is a strong likelihood that Wilkinson will die behind bars, never to see freedom again. As he was being led to the cells, a member of Eddie's family shouted a single word that summed up the feelings of those left behind: animal. Eddie's best friend, Trevor Lake, had this to say after the sentencing, and quote, "I have known Ed for 22 years. I met him not long after he moved to Blackpool. We hit it off straight away and had a connection. Ed would visit most days. We had a routine and I'd speak to him every day and see him every other day. We supported each other. We were each other's family and emotional support. Ed had a rescue dog called Cassie, who he loved. He wouldn't go anywhere without her. And now I look after Cassie. She gives me comfort. She is my world and my rock. If it wasn't for her, I'd be in a darker place. But I keep it together for Cassie. Because of our routine, I immediately knew something was wrong. I went round and saw Cassie alone and distressed. I knew something was wrong. I questioned my own actions and questioned whether there was something I could have done to stop it. My mind constantly thinks about what happened to Ed and why." And Eddie's family, who were dignified throughout, had this to say, and quote, "To lose someone by death is something everyone endures at some point, but to lose someone through the actions of another person is different. When I heard Eddie had been murdered, I thought it would have been a single act, like a punch. What happened and the way he was prevented from being buried or cremated has sickened us. Edward wasn't argumentative. He may stand up for himself, but he would walk away from trouble. We couldn't eat or focus on anything, knowing he had been murdered and butchered. We fight to stop thinking about the horrific nature of how Edward was taken from us, and don't want to lose self-control. It's hard to believe what that monster did to him. It's like something you see on the TV when you watch crime dramas. You watch those from the comfort of your home and never think it could be you who suffers that incredible act of evil. Nothing will ever bring Edward back. we will never fully process what happened to him. This case shocked me due to the grotesque actions from Wilkinson. How a man with no criminal record can suddenly be dissecting a heart from a human body over an argument about vermin infestation. It's just terrifying to me. You really don't know what people are capable of. Thank you for watching. Until next time, stay sane.